everyone, welcome back to the Maple Spirit Pulse Video Bite, where we do a quick dive into hot topics on Canadian religion, spirituality, and secularity. My name's Sarah Wilkins-Laflamme. I'm Director of the Institute for Religion, Culture, and Societal Futures, and I'm joined here today by my lovely colleague Ann MacGregor, Vice President at St. Jerome's University and Associate Director at the Institute. And today's hot topic is religious schools in Canada. So, hi, Ann.
Hi, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here. The weather's good now. It rained early on, but it's super nice now. So, Ann, it's the end of the school year, and we're stood here outside the former St. Louis School in Waterloo, Ontario. And so why don't you tell us a bit about this former school and maybe how it represents some of the dynamics of religious schools in Ontario or in Canada more widely?
Yeah, I thought this would be a fun location. I don't know if folks can tell, but it's now been turned into condos.
It's condos.
It's not a
Yeah.
functional school. And I chose this location for a couple of reasons. First is that it helps explain the difference between what's happening in Catholic schools in the United States and how Canada is a little different. And then also it tells us a little bit about how things have changed and evolved over time. So in terms of how Canada is different than the United States, at least in many provinces, including Ontario, in the United States, this sort of phenomenon of a school being closed and turned into condos would be the majority of the story. So in my dissertation work and in some of my other research and in great research done by colleagues at the University of Notre Dame, lots of declining enrollment in Catholic schools in the US since the 1960s, schools closing all over, leaving behind buildings that communities have to figure out what to do with.
Turn into condos.
Yes, alumni who are losing their sense of their school community, and students who are having to find other homes, either another Catholic school in another community or maybe go to a charter school, those kinds of things. In Canada, the funding, particularly in Ontario, and I'll focus my remarks on Ontario for this little Maple Pulse, the stable funding has allowed for less of what we see behind us. We don't see lots of former school buildings turned into condos. But there still is a story of change. So for that second reason I chose this location is I'm reminded of a quote that somebody shared with me when I was interviewing principals 5 or 6 years ago. They said, you know, I find it interesting, there's a hospital down the street, and I think if somebody fell asleep in that hospital in 1925 and woke up in 2025, I'm modifying the quote for time, it was a few years ago now, that in the hospital sector, almost nothing would be recognizable. Modern medicine has changed so much.
I was worried you were going to say it was going to be the same. I'm like, oh no, no, it's changed.
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
Everything about it. Who might be assisting you with your medical issues, how that looks, the treatments you receive. But for schools, if somebody fell asleep in a school in 1925 and woke up in 2025, sure, there would be some computers and some smart boards and some students might look a little different, but it would be a teacher in front of the classroom and rows of students getting direction from those teachers.
Like it was 100 years ago.
Yes, but there's still a lot of change in the sector. So who runs schools, how they're funded, the types of students that are going, and much of my research and the research of others focuses on this change. So this school actually used to be run by the Congregation of the Resurrection, which is a religious order who has deep ties to this region and to St. Jerome's University where I work. They continue to be involved in schools, but now it's much more common for schools to be run by professional school boards, many of which will be familiar to folks around the province.
And that includes the publicly funded Catholic school boards, right? They're still professionally run. Okay.
Yeah, in Ontario, there are a number of Catholic school boards, and
which are public.
Which are public and publicly funded, which is part of why we don't see as many school closures, because there's support there.
Of funding, yeah.
And in the Waterloo region, in fact, what we're seeing is not closing of schools, but some need for construction of new schools as there's a growing population, largely due, of course, to immigration in Canada.
Right. So these changes that you talked about, are there any kind of key ones that you'll see impacting Catholic religious schools in Ontario over the years to come, or that might actually come out of these religious schools that might impact the rest of us? Or?
Yeah, I would say there are a few things that when I talk to Catholic school leaders and just thinking of things on the student side as well, I would say one thing is there's polarization in the Catholic Church right now in terms of folks who, for example, disagree with the Church's position on same-sex marriage or other issues of what some people call the sins of the pelvis. And that sort of disconnect means that group of people is often pushing back on more traditional church teachings.
Right.
At the same time, there is a group of folks, a sort of really robust community of more traditional Catholics who get frustrated with contemporary Catholic schools for example, raising the pride flag, which many Catholic institutions view as a matter of human rights in the province of Ontario, not a religious question.
Yeah, and it's been the source of big debates in this region.
Yes, big debates in this region and elsewhere in the province.
Yeah.
So school communities and school leaders, I think, are really faced with this problem of, for some people, they're not Catholic enough, and for others, they're far too Catholic.
Yeah.
So walking that line, I think, will continue to be a challenge, or discerning sort of where the church goes next is something schools will struggle with. The other thing I think that will be a kind of change is this kind of population growth. So students in schools will come from different backgrounds, have different lived experiences than students of the past, and that will push on people working in schools to be able to try and meet those unique needs of students that are distinct from students they might have had in the past. And then I would say, kind of linked to the Institute's work, all of the trends that are impacting religion more generally in Canada are impacting schools too. So a shift towards spirituality, increasing numbers of folks not identifying with any religion in particular.
Including from Catholic backgrounds.
Yes, it's a joke that's often said that the second largest religious group after Catholics is lapsed Catholics, which is not empirically accurate. But
it's not far off though.
yeah, so that group, which might qualify to go or wish to send their children to Catholic school, there's more conversation now about, are those folks also going to Mass every week? Are they engaging in the sacraments? Are they true sort of participants in Catholic organizational life?
How quote unquote Catholic are they? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's a big change, and for folks working in education or who care about education, something to think about. And then I guess the last thing I would say, it's also in the news quite frequently, is public opinion around the funding of Catholic schools.
Yeah.
And so even though this is kind of constitutionally enshrined in the case of Ontario, generally speaking, when a poll comes out, it shows people are, very much thinking of that United States separation of church and state, not particularly interested in funding things for a single religion in particular. At the same time, there's also been some more recent data that suggests people are okay actually a little bit with educational pluralism, choice, the ability for parents to choose different options.
Right.
It's just the kind of one option that raises issues with public opinion. And we've seen this come up politically in Canada from time to time. The ability to change this requires some pretty significant constitutional...
It would open another can of worms. Yeah,
so
it's not easy change here. Yeah.
I don't anticipate that in the next decade or so that we're going to see a really large shift in how schools are funded, but I think we'll continue to see public opinion push on, if you're getting funding, then shouldn't you also be open to taking students of all backgrounds, which connects with some of my earlier comments.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks so much, Caroline. That was super helpful and super interesting. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you in the next video. Bye.